Hello. I didn't see you there. I'm Daniel Watkins, and you are watching The Watkins Guide to CVs. Thanks for tuning in. In this video, I'm going to take you through my tips and tricks to writing the perfect curriculum vitae. So get your best tweed jacket with the elbow patches and join me in this wonderful journey in the world of professional development. Okay, welcome back everybody. This is the second video that I'm making in this kind of series of videos on professional development. In this video, we're going to focus on CVs, or curriculum vitae. In this video, we're going to kind of tackle it in two big chunks. First, we're going to start by answering the question, what is a CV? And specifically, how is a CV different from a resume? And then second, we're going to dive into kind of how to write a CV. What are the main sort of tips and tricks and things that you need to consider when creating your own CV? Okay, before I go any further, I should note that there are lots of guides out there on the internet as to how to write a CV. That's totally fine if you want to do your own research, completely fine by me, and I don't profess to have all the answers to writing the perfect CV here, despite what I said before. But these are going to be my tips and tricks and my sort of suggestions for putting together a really solid CV. Okay, so let's begin just by answering the simple question of what is a CV? All right, welcome to the Watkins Guide to CVs. So if you are thinking in this final module of the course about going to postgraduate study, right? Whether it be a graduate program in history or a graduate program in a different field or law school or anything like that, this is a video to show you how to produce a curriculum vitae, which is one of those sort of essential documents that you need for postgraduate applications. So let me begin by just telling you what is a CV. And I'm taking this definition from a colleague of mine, Dr. Daniel Barish, with whom I had a conversation a few years ago about CVs. So I'm kind of pulling a quote from him here. He describes CVs as a kind of document that lists your academic accomplishments, which would imply to a graduate school or some other postgraduate program that you are prepared to do the work that they will be asking of you. Okay, I picked this kind of quote for a particular reason. Because the point of a CV is, first of all, to make some sort of case to like a graduate school, right? Or a law school, or maybe some sort of large grant or fellowship, like a Fulbright or something like that. They're for those types of institutions. And second, the whole point of a CV is to show that institution that you are prepared to do the work that that institution will be asking you to do, whether it be sort of the study of the law at a law school, or the study of history at, say, a master's program in history, or the sort of research that you're going to undertake in a Fulbright program or something like that. The point of a CV is to show that you are prepared. You are able to do the thing that people do in those programs. And so one thing that we have to kind of think about with a CV is how a CV then is different from a resume. You may or may not have watched my other video on how to write a resume. If you have, then you're going to notice some real significant differences between what I'm going to say here about CVs and what I said about resumes. In a way, they're really similar documents. They are kind of lists of your accomplishments and experience. But a CV includes only academic accomplishments and experiences. You do not talk about your job as a barista at a coffee shop or selling t-shirts at the Gap, two jobs that I have had in the past. Instead, you talk about all the things that you've done in university, all the things that you've done outside the university that have given you sort of academic skills, academic experiences, academic accomplishments. And again, the reason you do this is because you are making a case to, say, a grad program, a law school, a fellowship, that you are the right person for a graduate program or grant or fellowship. The fact of the matter here is that you have to think of a CV through the eyes of the admissions people at these institutions. Most of these institutions have a limited amount of spots for new graduate students or new law school students. And frankly, they want to get it right. They want to accept people that they feel confident are going to be able to succeed at their institution. They don't want to waste a spot on a person who actually doesn't know what they're doing. So a CV is a document to help give confidence to the admissions people at these institutions. You're basically saying in a CV, yes, I am a good bet. I am a person who is able to do the work that you want me to do. You can take a chance on me, as Abba said. Shout out to Abba. Okay, now let's take a deeper look at what CV writing is at its best. What are the kind of tips and tricks that you should know before you start creating your own CV? Okay, so how do we do it? Here are my 5 rules. Rule number 1, make an argument about how you are prepared for postgraduate study. Remember, the point of a CV is to convince an admissions officer or some person on an admissions council that you know what you're doing. So your choices on what to include and not to include on a CV are basically choices about whether or not they show that you are prepared for postgraduate study, for the type of study you're going to do at the institution that you're applying for. Okay, rule number 2, omit work experience unless it is directly relevant to the program for which you are applying. Again, this is the main difference between a CV and a resume. The point here is not to talk about your work as a barista or your work selling used cars. The only exception here is that if you did some sort of job that is actually really relevant to the postgraduate program that you're applying for. Let me give you an example, right? If you worked as a paralegal at a law firm or, like an intern at a law firm and you're applying to law school, you can include that. That's fine. But your sales job at PetSmart, not going to show up on your CV. Rule number 3, include your education, academic accomplishments, research experience, and academic skills. Okay, let's go over all these things. These are kind of the essentials of a CV. First is your education. You have to start a CV really at the top with your education. And that means the bachelor's degree that you're getting here at Baylor, and maybe an associate's degree if you got one before coming to Baylor. The only thing you don't put in education is your high school degree. CVs usually focus on basically just stuff you do in college and beyond. Second, you want to put your academic accomplishments. That can include awards, that can include, the dean's list, that can include publications, presentations, any sort of thing that makes you look as if you have done something that is good academically. Third, you want to put research experience. So this could include research grants if you get one of those, but it doesn't have to include that. You can get really creative with this. You can talk about the research papers you wrote in classes or the research projects that you helped professors with. You can talk about maybe the research skills you've acquired and how you've acquired them, or programs or certificates that you've gotten. Anything that demonstrates that you've done research is a good thing to have on a CV. And finally, you want to put your academic skills. Now, these differ depending on the kind of graduate program that you're applying to. In history, one of the things that's considered an academic skill is your foreign language abilities. If you apply to law school, there might be other skills that you want to emphasize, maybe something like a mock court or mock trial. But whatever you can kind of make an argument is useful for what you're going to do in that graduate program or that postgraduate program, then include it on your CV. Rule number 4, take the space that you need. What I mean here is essentially that a CV can be as long as it needs to be. In fact, if you go online and you look at CVs of professors that have been around for quite a while, you'll notice that sometimes they are obnoxiously long. I'm talking like 14, 15 pages. They're huge. This really differentiates a CV from a resume. Resumes are 1 page and 1 page only. CVs can be as many pages as you need. Rule number 5, explain when necessary. The fact of the matter is that a lot of things that are intelligible in your specific academic environment that you're in, say like Baylor University, are oftentimes not that intelligible for people outside of that environment. So if you were part of, honor society or a president of some sort of club, you might need to take the time to explain what that honor society was or what that club did in order to actually make it worthwhile for people reading your CV. So, like with resumes, use bullet points. Explain the things that are on your CV and show how they are evidence that you are equipped to do the things that you're going to be asked to do. Okay, so right now I want to show you kind of an example of a CV. This example is kind of a CV that I got from a previous student, although it's tweaked considerably in different ways for me to sort of show you different elements of a CV that I think are good. Okay, the first thing we might look at is just what's included on the CV. So look at what the person included. They included the student's education, academic honors and awards, research experience, more on this in a bit, presentations, public history experience, professional affiliations, and languages. These are all things that have sort of currency for grad programs in history. And note what's not on there. We have nothing about how this student was a Starbucks barista or how the student used to perform as a clown at children's birthday parties. Okay, now let's look at some of these a little more closely. So, the student includes information about education, but here it's not just the degree that the student is getting. Yes, the student is getting a BA in history at Baylor University. Shout out! But also look at the education section. The student includes the minor that the student is getting, the student's GPA, a certificate in digital humanities scholarship, and even coursework that they've completed. The student also includes awards and honors, scholarships, and the dean's list. Great. And the student includes research experience. Here, a research project that the student did in a class and that the student submitted for publication in an undergraduate history journal. And the student also has the work that they did in a larger research project. The student also has stuff about presentations. It's great if you're thinking of going to graduate school in history to get some experience presenting a paper at a conference. Phi Alpha Theta has a bunch. Okay, and finally, the student has some skills listed here. Check out these language proficiencies. This is stuff that history programs in particular really value. Okay, notice also that this thing is 2 pages long. Not like a resume that has to be 1 page. CVs can be more than 1 page. And finally, the student has supplied some bullet points in order to explain certain things. For example, this scholarship here, the George Michael Stewart Scholarship in History, if it just was left as that, we wouldn't really know much about it. But here we know that it's awarded by Baylor University's Department of History and it's a merit-based scholarship. And below, we have some information on this student's research experience, what their research paper was, what this larger research project was, and what they did in order to accomplish it. So, shout out to stellar student here for having a great CV. Okay, now you know the basics of writing a CV. So you're going to have to write a CV and create a CV for my class, for this final project in the class. So I want to see you demonstrate the types of tips and tricks and skills that I talked about in this video. Before I go, though, I want to leave you with a few additional things to think about. First, I'll say something that I also said in the resume video, which is the one I recorded right before this. And that's that this process of putting together a CV, especially a CV for the first time, should sort of open your eyes to the things that you want to do in the coming years. What you'll notice, especially if you're doing this as an undergraduate for the very first time, is that you don't have a lot to put on a CV yet. That's okay. You're not expected to have a lot. But it should sort of make you aware of the types of things that you could put on a CV, the types of things that you might want to have on a CV. And that will hopefully motivate you to do those things, to accomplish those things, to find ways to get those on your CV by the time that you apply to grad school or law school or Fulbright fellowships or whatever else it is you might want to use a CV for. Okay, the final point I want to leave you with is just a kind of meta point about what the purpose of a CV really is. So when you're applying to, say, a graduate program, or when you're applying to law school, the main thing that your application is trying to do is to give the admissions people at that graduate school or law school the assurance that you are a good bet. You see, all of these places only have a limited amount of spots, and they want to make sure that they're admitting people who can actually do the things that they want them to do, who will succeed in their programs. The whole point of a graduate school or law school application, and by way of that, the whole point of a CV, is to give you an opportunity to show them that you are a good bet. Give them the confidence that bringing you to the place that they are is a wise thing to do, a wise way to allocate their resources. So what you really need to come clear in that CV is that you can do all the things that they're going to ask you to do in grad school, in law school, for a research fellowship, for whatever it is you're using the CV for. Okay, that's it for now. See you in the next video.